Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Workplace Safety North webinar, Interaction with Mobile Equipment, Top Health and Safety Risks for Underground Mines in Ontario. My name is Gabby Lemon, and I'm the event specialist here at Workplace Safety North. We appreciate your attendance today and want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started. Your microphones have been muted, and we ask that you use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen for speaker questions. Questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. If you have any technical issues using the Zoom application, do let us know in the chat box and we'll do our best to help you. Please note this webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording, a copy of the presentation, and resource information will be sent to you within a few days. Today we are joined by Robert Marin and Sam Barbuto from Workplace Safety North. I'll invite Robert and Sam on screen to start today's presentation. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Robert Marin, and this is Sam Barbuto. Today, the table of contents will cover the 18 slides containing risk assessment projects. The table of contents will look at the backgrounds and the reasons, models for accident causation. Slide 4 and 5 will talk about the tripartite and collective process, the workshops that we completed. Slide 6 will look at the risk assessment workshop results of the top 10 risk events by categories. Slide 7 will look at the pie chart, looking at the top 10 underground mining sector risk categories. Then we'll look at the table analysis of the top risk events by categories. Slide number 9 will look at the top 10 health and safety risks for underground mines with the infographics. Slide 10 will look at the table root cause analysis workshop participants. Then we'll look at the root cause analysis statement defined by the group. Then we'll get into the fishbone diagrams outlining the methods that was used during the workshops. Slide 13 is fishbone results categories, the breakdown of those categories. 14 will look at the root cause analysis primary causal factors. 15 will look at the top 10 causes for collisions in underground mines and the infographic that goes along with that. Number 16 will look at the table's list of the solutions of controls for the primary root causes. Then we'll discuss the next steps, which should we focus on immediately. And then we'll look at the next steps, proactive efforts of the Mining Legislative Review Committee, MLRC. So the risk assessment project basically looks at the Swiss cheese model, looking at design issues, gaps in regulations, training materials not being current, storage of key skill sets. When all of these holes within the Swiss cheese line up, then we have a simultaneous failure and absence of risk controls that could cause a catastrophic event. From the tripartite and collective process, there was 5 representatives from the labor and 5 representatives from the management looking at being selected. They were approved by the employers to participate in this process. There was an introduction, a 1-hour webinar describing the risk recording templates. This was provided through a SurveyMonkey. Completed the recording templates by dates specified. Then from there, we moved forward to a risk assessment workshop. This was a full-day session conducted both virtually and face-to-face, in which the participants voted on the risk rating, ranking the collective lists of what keeps them up at night. Then from there, there was a follow-up validation with Sam and myself, with each participants reviewing the compiled results and an opportunity for the participants to re-vote if needed. I just want to mention that any participants from WSN or the ministry were not allowed to vote during this process. From there, we sharing the finalized results, and we created a WSN infographic discussing distribution and promotion of the results. And then we started talking about the root cause analysis workshop. Then we reconvened. So this was a long process that took a few months to complete. I just have to move my picture here. There we go. The tri-party and collective process. So the workshop process was an open, transparent, and collaborative effort. Ensured persuasive viewpoints were heard, and responses were respected, not freely edited. Final list shared with the participants before the workshop. The workshop results were reviewed, validated by the participants. The findings, there were acceptable solutions that all members can support. Only industry experts ranked the risks. Process was not about consensus, although results demonstrated a significant degree of convergence. So there's a lot of discussions throughout this process, and a lot of participants viewed their points, and were able to have open discussions throughout this process. So the risk assessment workshop results, the top 10 risk events based on the highest risk within that category. So the category for the top 10, some of the categories that we had was equipment, material, and machinery, fire and explosion, musculoskeletal disorder, ground control, and occupational illnesses and disease. Number 1 was interaction with mobile equipment collisions with other equipment, large versus small, looking at traffic controls. Number 2 was interaction with mobile equipment and pedestrians. Number 3 was the adoption of new technology, battery electric vehicle fires, battery electric vehicle overheating, catching on fire or explodes underground, injuring operators, miners, and or mine rescue personnel. Number 4 was workers suffering manual handling or repetitive strain injuries. Number 5 was ground control failures causing injury. Number 6 was exposure to airborne substances. Number 7, interaction with mobile equipment, collisions with infrastructure, conveyor and towers and etc., things like that. Number 8 was the inadvertent contact with stored energy. Hearing loss came in at number 9, and major failure of underground from mobile equipment was number 10. So out of the 10 underground mining sector risk categories, if we look at the category of equipment and material and machinery, came in at 43%. That took in a couple different categories. If you look at occupational disease and illnesses, 10% was there. For fire and explosion, the second highest category, musculoskeletal hazard came in at 10%, environmental came in at 9%, and ground control came in at 9%. So when looking at the top 3, so equipment, material, and machinery, some of the contributing factors: large equipment with reduced sightline, brighter ambient lighting, and equipment headlights washing out. These are just a short list of some of the contributing factors that we discuss. Lack of collision avoidance technology. So the results: collision with people and other equipment and infrastructure. If we look at number 2 was fire and explosion, was the second highest group category. Autonomous equipment, specialized explosives, inadequate prevention of maintenance programs. Some of the results from some of these contributing factors and many others that were listed during the workshop. Injuries to workers, damage to equipment, and loss of process would be the results. And the third that came in was occupational illnesses. If we look at some of the contributing factors: lack of inadequate engineering or ventilation plans, mobile equipment in disrepair, inconsistent diesel emissions testing, and some of these results would be injury to workers, long-term effects resulting in occupational illnesses. So the top 3 categories, as you could see, and again, these are just a short list of contributing factors for these. So an infographic was created for the top 10 health and safety risks for underground mines. I'm sure some of you have probably seen this. We have a link to our website to download this infographic. Interaction of mobile equipment, collisions with other equipment was number one. Exposure to airborne interaction of mobile equipment and pedestrian came in at number two. And number three was adoption of new technology, battery electric vehicles. Number four, workers suffering a manual handling and repetitive strain injuries. Number five was ground control failures causing injury. Number six was exposure of airborne hazardous substances. Number seven was interaction with mobile equipment, collisions with infrastructure. As you can see, out of the top 10, 3 was all with regards to that interaction of mobile equipment. Number 8 came in with the inadvertent contact with stored energy. Number 9 on the infographic was hearing loss, and number 10 was major failures of an underground mobile equipment. For the root cause analysis workshop, the participants, we had worker representative, which was represented from Valet, KGHM, Barrick, and KGHM. This was Greg Hilaire, Nav Gill, Rick Legree, and Herb Watkins. And out of the employer's representation, we had Chris Betzel, Loy Alterman, Redpath and Barrick. We had Jake Hughes for Technica Mining. We had Bruno Fortin for Valet and Darren Raymond for Compass Minerals. For the workshop participants that did not have a voting right, was some representation from the Ministry of Labor, Immigrations, Training and Skills Development. We had Hassim and Sujoy Day. For WSEN, we had Sam Barbudo, Robert Marin, Tom Welton, Tricia Valentine, and Tiana LaRocque. So out of the root cause analysis, the risk statement that was agreed upon throughout the group. So based on the results of the fishbone, what we put at the beginning of the fishbone, and this is what the group decided would be a good statement, was the collisions or contacts between mobile equipment, pedestrians, light vehicles, and or fixed facilities causing harm to workers.
Right, so just as Rob just mentioned, just with the statement, as you can see there on the right on the fishbone diagram. So you're dealing with the 6 branches or 6 bones, as you can see. So highlighted under tools and equipment, processes, people, measures, environment, and culture. And then the group came up with primary causes, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary causes for each of these elements. And we'll go through them in the next few slides. So the root cause analysis for the primal causal factors. So these are the primary causes, and the ones that you see in the black boxes highlighted in white. Okay, those are the top 10 primary causal factors for the full exercise. So I'll just go through the top 10, as you can see there. So lack of collision avoidance technology is one of them, design of equipment, inadequate communication systems. As you move down for environment, legacy mine design and pedestrian exposures. You're moving over to people, dealing with fit for work, distracted driving, and non-compliance to procedures and standards. Then under process, you're dealing with traffic management program. Then up to measures, lack of company-based training. And out of the top 10, there is not a top one for culture, but there are a number of primary causes, as you could see there. Here's the first one we'll touch on, so is process. And as you can see there in bold, you have the traffic management program. which is one of the top 10 primary causes. Then just the legend on the left-hand side. So you can see the secondary causal factor are in blue, the tertiaries are in red, and then the quaternary causal factors are in green. Okay, so I'll just go through one of them. So I'll just touch on the traffic management program there. So you can see as the secondary causal factor under that primary cause, inconsistent consideration for pedestrians in the workplace, inconsistent review, training of traffic management program, and not built around a risk assessment review. And then just under that component, so not built around risk assessment review, you have a tertiary, which is lack of review of gaps and implementation of change. So I'm not going to read every one of those components. Like Gabby mentioned in the beginning, this will be shared with the group and industry. So next one, we're dealing with measures. So the next bone. Okay, so again, lack of competency-based training as a primary factor or causal factor. Then the secondary, you have lack of verification or lack of competency-based training, and then ineffective training standards and measurement. So those are the two. So you have a primary and a secondary. And as you can see throughout this diagram, there's a few there that have a tertiary causal factor. This slide is a little more complex. There's lots of information. So this is the people factor that we're dealing with. So I could maybe just try on the non-compliance to procedures and standards as the primary causal factor. And then you could see in the blue, you could see the secondary. So dealing with production incentives, limited access to procedures, inadequate procedures, information overload, lack of high visibility PPE, and also dealing with non-compliance to traffic management program. So the tertiaries for those components, so non-compliance to traffic management program, you're dealing with lack of initial ongoing training and accountability. Okay, also with the lack, sorry, gap before just, so the tertiary for lack of high vis PPE is lack of PPE maintenance program. And then you have a combination for the tertiary of inadequate follow-up and training effectiveness. So dealing with limited access to procedures, inadequate procedures, or information overload. And then the final one there is structure of incentive program as a tertiary for production incentives. So again, there's a number of factors there. So maybe I'll touch on just the fit for work also, because you do have a quaternary causal factor there. So fit for work, you have traveling distance to and from work, and you have a tertiary is lack of resources, service providers, awareness use, distraction for task at hand, and substance abuse that we have another component. So also dealing with fit for work, you're dealing with a lack of EFAP, mental and physical health. Then you have that substance use there. So as a secondary, so tertiaries, you're dealing with lack of testing. So lack of testing, you have lack of technology and lack of legislation as a quaternary for the substance use and lack of testing. You have family issues. So the quaternary there would be lack of the EFAP. And then under the substance use, lack of facilities and treatment support as a tertiary. Then a quaternary, you have a lack of funding and resources. So again, just give you an idea of what the committee came up with. out of those causal factors and how deep it went. So this one dealing with tools and equipment. There's another branch of the fishbone. And just dealing with the primary cause, so inadequate maintenance as one of the top 10. Secondary, dealing with lack of compliance to maintenance programs, not enough skilled labor, equipment availability. The tertiaries for those, capital restraints, industry demand, training not keeping up with technology, and lack of priorities, and the lack of resources. Then some of the quaternary, dealing with from the training not keeping up with technology, production pressures. From capital constraints, you're dealing with work environment demographics, and also manufacturer delays. So just to touch on a few of those components under tools and equipment. So under the environment component or bone or branch is, as you can see there. So again, just on the left-hand side, you're dealing with the legend. So the primary cause, causal factor. So if we go to pedestrian exposures as one of the top 10s. So lack of risk assessments as a secondary, not obeying signs and barricades, inconsistent planning, scheduling of work, and inconsistent communication between work groups. So those are the secondary components to the primary causal factor. Could also lead on to legacy mine design. So just with mine design and technology moving forward, maybe just some of the historic mine layouts that have transpired over the decades. So the secondary causal factor to legacy mine design, so traffic management planning, not in place, a number of pieces of equipment in the area, equipment larger than the environment. So the tertiary to those, poor use of management of change program, and then the quaternary to the poor use of management of change, no standard or guidance, or lack of training awareness to the program. So dealing with education and knowledge. Then dealing with the culture branch. So you can see here there are a number of primary causal factors, but from the group, they weren't rated one of the top 10. So just going through some of the components. So just dealing with failure of IRS as a primary cause. The secondary cause, you're dealing with mistrust between parties, unsupported joint health and safety committee, and legal ramifications as one component. Then you have maybe just resistance to change as another primary causal factor. So the secondary causal factor is dealing with low risk awareness, high risk tolerance, which deals with a tertiary of lack of inclusion, comfort disruption, lack of enforcement, and changes not properly explained. The secondary for resistance to change are high risk awareness, high risk tolerance. So dealing with the previous statements that I read. So dealing with the tertiary of lack of inclusion. And then the other component dealing with inappropriate attitudes. Okay, so out of those branches and discussion with the group, so we listed here the top 10 primary causal factors. So from each category, as you can see there. So you have tools and equipment. So the primary root cause was design of equipment. So again, this was voted on by the management representatives and the worker representatives. So environment, so if you have historic mine workers mismatched with modern equipment as a primary root cause. Under the people factor, you have non-compliance to procedures and standards. The process branch, you're dealing with ineffective traffic management as a primary root cause. Under tools and equipment, so inadequate communication systems and also lack of confidence in collision avoidance technology, which were rated primary root causes. Under the environment branch, dealing with pedestrian exposure to mobile equipment. Dealing with people, so distracted driving and fit for work were the primary root causes there. The number 8, number 9, and then under measures. So the measures branch or bone. So primary root cause there dealing with ineffective assessment of training competencies. Like we did in the risk assessment and other risk assessments, root cause analysis, we developed a infographic for this root cause analysis, just stating from the previous slide, the top 10 components. So as you can see there, the top 10 causes of collisions in the underground mines. Design of equipment, just rewarded some of the, for number 2, older mine workings don't match modern equipment. A little bit of rewording there. Non-compliance to procedures and standards, number 3. Number 4, ineffective traffic management program. Number 5, inadequate communication systems. Number 6, you're dealing with lack of confidence in collision avoidance technology. Number 7, pedestrian exposure to mobile equipment. Number 8, distracted driving. Number 9, a little rewarding there, mental and physical health, dealing with fit for duty or fit for work. And then number 10, ineffective assessment of training competencies. So again, these posters are already on the website and could be printed out and shared throughout each organization. So moving forward, so a list of solutions and controls for the top primary root causes. So as you seen in the last couple of slides. So the scope of the exercise does not include assessment of listed controls. The list provides information on specific controls and or activities that support a control. Okay, so these are specific, measurable, observable, and audible. So what we have here, didn't list all the controls, but we will have another document with this presentation. So in the next couple of days, we will have a technical report that will cover all these controls for each of the primary root causes. So just for this as an example, for tools and equipment and design of equipment, so the controls the group came up with for proximity detection cameras, so without further clutter in the cabs. So management of change, a better collaboration between OEMs and industry on design of equipment requirements, legal requirements clearance from the wall and safety bays, review site-specific commissioning checklists, so dealing with blind spots, line of sight, dimensions to mine workings and infrastructure, speed considerations, braking, cab ergonomics, and illumination. Another component dealing with robust and dependable collision avoidance systems, legal requirements for collision avoidance systems, provincial guideline for equipment selection and application, and the OMA collaboration with OEMs for the improved equipment. So again, like I mentioned earlier on, there will be a technical report that will be also put on our website and shared with industry within the next couple days. So next steps moving forward. So the results will be shared with the Mining Legislative Review Committee and the Provincial Mining Tripartite Committee for consideration and development of future health and safety related supports and direction for the mining sector. So the workshops identify primary causal factors and specific controls will be assisted in the establishment and in supplementing industry leading practices. You're dealing with knowledge of legislation and standards, and also the future development of supervisor Common Core training. So if there's any questions
Yes,
for
thanks, Sam.
myself or Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Robert. We do have some time for some audience questions, although I'm not seeing any right now. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A section and we would be happy to answer it. In the meantime, while we give everyone an opportunity to ask a question if they have one, I will ask Robert and Sam if they have any final thoughts they'd like to share with the group.
So just like I mentioned earlier, we are working on a technical report. They'll give you a little bit more information on the controls from the top 10 causes that the group came up with. And that will also be posted on the website.
Thanks, Sam.
Final comment for myself would just be that it was a really enjoyable process to go through and meet representations from the sector. Everybody was forthcoming and being honest with open dialogue and conversations, and the group put a lot of good work into this process, and I think it was a good result. And we look forward to helping any firms out there with regards to risk assessments and running them through this process of the standard delivery model of risk assessments that we've done in the last, I think it started off in 2014 when we started doing these.
Perfect. Thanks, Robert. So we've had two questions come in. Both are related. So both are about collision avoidance systems. The first person is asking, could you comment a bit more on the lack of confidence in the collision avoidance systems? And then someone else is asking, what are the challenges for adopting existing collision avoidance systems?
Well, I think just the challenges. So depends on site specific, just what collision avoidance system you're going to get into. So there's various components out there. Just is it feasible for your firm to get into certain these avoidance systems? So maybe not all of them work for all organizations. There could be specific ones that work for a particular site. So that you'll have to do some legwork with some of those suppliers out there.
I think that was one of the comments that was felt throughout the group, was that there's lots of different collision avoidance systems out there that's been trialed, and some successful, not so much on others. The group felt that a collaboration between the OEMs and the mines working together, coming up with a system that's consistent throughout all properties, that is dependable and not distracting and not creating other hazards. I think that's some of the comments that were coming out of the group during the session that I could recall.
Yeah, so either you have Wi-Fi capabilities or leaky feeder. So again, it's some are site specific that would work for them.
Perfect. Now we have another question here. Someone is asking, can you explain how needing or implementing legislation is a control for preventing mobile equipment collisions?
You think explain needing or implementing legislation? Well, if you look at section 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 of Regulation 854, it talks to the risk assessment process. And we know that history tells us that interaction of mobile equipment has had some bad results. So right off the bat, there is a legal compliance to do that risk assessment and identify what control measures you have in place. There are some best practices out there with regards to, which is not a legal compliance issue, but it helps satisfy that legal compliance issue. There is another legal compliance issue under traffic management programs, which could be interpreted as a legal compliance for that interaction piece as well. I don't know, Sam, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, you touched on the traffic management program, part of legislation. Yeah, I think it's not much else like you explained.
Okay, thank you both. So I think that's it for the questions. Oh, sorry, did someone have something? Did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I'm just saying, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, let us know. If not, you can always follow up afterwards. You'll have the contact information of Robert and Sam. We just got another question here. It's a bit of a long one, so I'll just read it out. A lot of mining companies have or are implementing fatality risk management systems. The data from this study may be helpful to perform a gap assessment against the controls which are part of the fatality risk management system versus the root causes identified for interaction with mobile equipment incidences from this study to confirm they are adequately comprehensive and effective. So just more of a comment, but
Yeah, it sounds
Sure.
sounds good. Like, yeah, I agree with that. I think anything that we could use and utilize to prevent bad things from happening with the interaction of mobile equipment is a step moving forward. So anything you want to share with the industry, by all means, please pass it along.
yeah, thank you for that comment. So I'm not seeing any further questions, so I think we can wrap it up from here. So I just want to thank you for attending today's webinar, Interaction with Mobile Equipment, Top Health and Safety Risk for Underground Mines in Ontario. A copy of the presentation and the recording will be emailed to you within the next few days and posted to the resources page of workplacesafetynorth.ca. Thank you again.